Oh, now I've seen fire and I've seen rain.
James Taylor, man, I tell you what, if there was only one spot left on this planet for a singer and songwriter, I'm giving it to James Taylor. He's an incredible musician and songwriter. And every time I hear his stuff, it just kind of gives me the chills, you know what I'm saying? I grew up on this in the 70s as a kid, running around on my bicycle and skates and stuff like that. And I'd be at the park or to the beach or somewhere like that. And back in those days, people would turn on their car radios and they'd have the windows wound down and you'd hear the music coming out of these cars. And this is some of the stuff I was hearing. Oh yeah, of course, there was all kinds of other stuff, jazz, blues, and rock and whatnot happening. But this was a different time, man. Things weren't so separated as they are in music right now. Back in those days, a lot of people listened to the same music. And one of the artists that everybody loved was James Taylor. I got a story to tell you about his life, the highs and the lows, and things you may not have known. It's gonna be a little in-depth. Hang in there with me. I'll see you guys at the bottom.
I like to be educated, but I'm so frustrated.
You just call out my name.
Yeah, man. Bob Dylan made folk rock personal, but James Taylor, he lived what he sang. His songs weren't just poetic, they were actual life story, laid bare. No mystery, no metaphor to decode, just raw, lived experience in every line. Hey, James Vernon Taylor was born March 12, 1948 in Boston, Massachusetts, into a wealthy family. But don't let the thought of that crisp New England air fool you. His childhood wasn't filled with warmth. His father, Isaac Taylor, was a respected doctor, smart and accomplished, but also an alcoholic. James and his siblings were left with wounds that wouldn't show up on the outside, but they'd shape his life for decades. The family moved to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and while that gave James access to folk traditions and musical inspiration, it also placed him in a pressure cooker. One of 5 kids in a high-achieving family, that's where the groundwork was laid for James' lifelong battles with depression. But he found his escape, music. Not just a hobby, it was therapy for him. He picked up the cello first, then switched to guitar. And that guitar, it became his lifeline long before therapists ever entered the picture. By his teens, the cracks were showing. James was secretly using drugs. He was sleeping 20 hours a day, his grades completely collapsed. He felt crushed under the weight of becoming an adult. The depression wasn't just deep, it was consuming him. In late 1965, at just 17 years old, and the family had money to do it, James committed himself to McLean Psychiatric Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts. He was treated with chlorpromazine, and the structured days helped him regain some of his footing. Now, this wasn't gossip, this was his truth. Mental illness wasn't a buzzword back then, it was kind of taboo, but James faced it head on. He even earned his high school diploma in 1966 from the hospital in the Arlington School. That state didn't just give him stability, it gave him one of his earliest songwriting breakthroughs. Now, based on his time in McLean, he wrote Knocking Around the Zoo.
Just knocking around the zoo on a Thursday afternoon.
That wasn't just art, that was autobiography. Taylor checked himself out and briefly attended Elon University, but soon moved to New York and formed a band called The Flying Machine. They played around in a couple of clubs, released a single, and just fizzled out. But James was getting sharp musically. He'd already played in a band in high school called the Corsairs with his brother, Alex, and friend Donnie Korchmar. By the summer of 1966, James was performing regularly at the Night Owl Cafe in Greenwich Village. He was building a name, but also surrounding himself with the wrong crowd. This dude started using heroin. Later on, James would say of this time, "I learned a lot about music and too much about drugs. Man, heroin had him, and deep." He said it was as easy to get high in the village as it was to get a drink. That's crazy. He'd strum his guitar in Washington Square Park just to feel something, then be found passed out on a bench somewhere. It was so bad that his apartment became a hangout for runaways and criminals while he hung in the streets. Eventually, broke and abandoned by his manager, James made a desperate call to his father. And fortunately, Isaac Taylor drove all night from North Carolina to New York just to rescue him. James would spend 6 months getting treatment, starting over, even needing throat surgery to repair vocal cords damaged from his singing too harshly. Now, at 19, looking for a fresh start, James used a small inheritance to move to London. There, he recorded a batch of demos that made their way to someone legendary. Hey, James Taylor became the first non-British artist signed to Apple Records. Yes, that Apple Records, the Beatles label. Paul McCartney and George Harrison were the ones backing him. In 1968, his self-titled debut album dropped in the UK, and then in '69 in the US. It earned some praise, but little sales.
Said I'm gone to Carolina in my mind.
Nice. Carolina on My Mind, now one of his signature tracks, but it just flopped on the charts at the time. Instead of launching him to stardom, the whole experience nearly broke him. Why, you wonder? Man, because while he was rubbing elbows with the Beatles, he was also knee-deep in heroin addiction. The pressure of being around the biggest band in the world only made things worse. The demons got louder. No, Apple Records couldn't deal with it anymore, so they dropped him. But here's the thing, James was just living his life. By the time he was 20, his songs already had the emotional weight of someone twice his age. While other young singers were faking it, James was writing about survival. So after Apple, he went back to rehab and relocated to Laurel Canyon in LA, chasing another reset. And this one would finally hit.
Rockabye, my sweet baby James.
Y'all, he wrote this song while driving from Martha's Vineyard to North Carolina to see his newly born nephew for the first time. The song was intended to be a lullaby for the baby, but this thing changed everything for him. Also on that album,
Whoa, now I've seen fire and I've seen rain.
the song hit number 3 on the charts. But this wasn't just a chart hit. This was grief set to music. James wrote it about a friend who died by suicide while he was in treatment. Now there's debate over the real story, but what mattered was the emotion. The heartbreak was real. And the public felt it too. Millions of them. With his gentle tenor and roots in Appalachian folk, soul, and Hank Williams-style country, James Taylor tapped into something deeper. The track's complex chords and soulful acoustic guitar, paired with that rock background of Kortchmar and others, man, this created a sound that defined a generation. Fire and Rain marked the beginning of James Taylor as the voice of soft rock and a chronicler of baby boomer heartbreak. But here's the truth, fame doesn't fix pain. It just puts it on display for everybody else to see. Then in 1971, he scored his first #1 hit with
When you're down and troubled.
You Got a Friend, written by Carole King. In 1976, he released the Greatest Hits album, which would sell over 10 million copies. Through the 70s, Taylor dropped 7 more albums and delivered hits like these.
How sweet it is to be loved by you. And I feel fine anytime she's around me now. Shower the people you love with love.
That's right. Now let's talk love. In 1970, James had a brief, powerful romance with Joni Mitchell. Their relationship was intense, short, but musically unforgettable. She's believed to have written the songs All I Want and This Flight Tonight about him. He wrote the song You Can Close Your Eyes for her, but the heroin took its toll, and all the potential love simply faded. Now, after Joni Mitchell, James Taylor's most public romance came in 1972 when he married singer Carly Simon. I remember that my dad had a nickname for her, the Wide Mouth Girl. Anyway, at first, they were a power couple, music royalty. They had 2 children, Ben and Sally, both of whom would go on to become professional musicians themselves. But behind closed doors, man, it was chaos. Taylor was still battling heroin and methadone addiction. Simon, for all her strength and success, she just couldn't save him. She later said he was gone a lot, and when he was home, he wasn't even really there. So they separated in 1981 and finally divorced in 1983 after 11 rocky years. In the 1980s, James continued releasing music, still failing to get totally clean though. But eventually that day would come. He finally kicked heroin in 1983, sometime after the divorce, and quit methadone in 1985, cold turkey. James is quoted as saying that he finally realized he needed to survive more than he needed to get high. He was trying to be on a straight and narrow. And not so well known, he married actress Catherine Walker in 1985. Conflicting accounts say Taylor's heroin addiction may have been creeping back in, but regardless, there was a strain that created emotional distance and impacted their ability to stay connected. So they too divorced. It was in 1996. 3 is a charm, so James wasn't done with love yet. In 2001, he married again to Caroline Kim Smedvig, and they've been together ever since, with 2 adult sons born in 2001. Yeah, that means James became an old dad. But he found something that he hadn't found before: peace and stability. Musically, James Taylor never stopped. He released Grammy-winning albums like Hourglass and October Road. In 2015, he put out Before This World, his first album to debut at #1 on the Billboard 200. And at that time, he was 67 years old. That's not a comeback, that's endurance. And in 2000, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's won 6 Grammys, sold over 100 million records worldwide. He was also awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, presented to him by President Barack Obama in 2015. But awards don't tell the whole story, man. James Taylor's music was never about flash. It was about truth. He made mental illness human. He made addiction relatable. He proved that being soft doesn't mean being weak. It means being real.
It's mighty nice to be back.
Every time he stepped on stage, it wasn't just to perform, it was to reconnect with fans, with pain, with healing. Y'all, as of today, James Taylor is still touring, still performing, still mentoring young artists. Still playing those same chords that somehow eventually saved him all those years ago. I think I said enough, man. James Taylor. Man, long live that guy and his plan. I don't know what the world's gonna do if he ever left us. I'll see you guys next time on The Music Mindset, y'all.